missing children were found in a sex trafficking sting that involved 200 victims. The nationwide two-week sweep also arrested 126 suspects of child sexual exploitation and 68 suspected traffickers.
At 5:20 a.m. inside the International Cargo Terminal at the Port of Savannah, Georgia, a federal cargo inspector named Marcus Ellison was completing an overnight release review when he noticed something that did not match. The shipment had been declared as agricultural equipment: 38 sealed containers, irrigation parts, replacement pumps, commercial farm hardware. The manifest was complete. The bill of lading was signed. The seal numbers matched. The weight declarations were within federal tolerance. On paper, the shipment was clean. Marcus had worked cargo inspections for 14 years. He knew what bad paperwork looked like. This was not bad paperwork. That was what bothered him. Container 22 had passed every automated check, but the rear seal frame looked slightly different from the rest of the container. The metal was the same color. The seal was intact. But the wood bracing around the inside edge appeared newer than the panels beside it. Not replaced. Not broken. Just different. Marcus pulled the container movement history. The route showed a 17-hour gap between two transfer points in Charleston and Savannah. No maintenance note. No inspection delay. No weather hold. No equipment failure. Just 17 hours that did not exist inside a system designed to document every movement. He checked the weight log next. The container had gained 280 pounds during transit, then returned to its original declared weight before final arrival. The shift was small enough to avoid automatic review, but it was not small enough to be invisible. At 5:41 a.m., Marcus requested a manual secondary inspection. 3 minutes later, the request was denied. No supervisor explanation. No review comment, only one clearance line. Approved for release. Marcus opened the authorization history. The release had been approved under a director-level override. Port DIR4. He searched the code. It appeared on 10 other containers over the previous 16 months. Same route, same small weight changes, same missing time, same inspection bypass. At 6:12 a.m., Marcus halted the release order and called federal supervisors. By 7:08 a.m., Container 22 was moved into a secured inspection bay. And before sunrise, one small difference in a seal frame would expose a trafficking corridor hidden inside America's cargo system. At 7:34 a.m., federal agents from Homeland Security Investigations and the FBI arrived at the secured inspection bay. The container remained sealed. No one had opened it yet. Investigators wanted every step documented, every photograph, every scan, every movement. If the container was connected to a larger network, they could not afford to contaminate the evidence. At 7:58 a.m., technicians conducted a thermal scan across the container walls. The results immediately raised concerns. Several heat signatures appeared in locations that did not match the declared cargo. Agricultural equipment did not produce body temperature heat patterns. The inspection was escalated. At 8:12 a.m., agents opened the rear doors. The first rows appeared normal. Boxes, machinery components, shipping pallets. Everything matched the manifest. Then investigators noticed something unusual. The cargo depth did not match the container dimensions. A reinforced partition had been built behind the first layer of freight. The wall looked professional, factory quality, designed to appear permanent. At 8:26 a.m., agents removed the false partition. Behind it, they found 9 children. The oldest appeared no older than 14. The youngest looked approximately 6. All showed signs of dehydration. Several required immediate medical attention. The inspection zone was locked down. Medical teams entered the scene. Federal investigators continued searching the container. A second concealed compartment was discovered beneath a modified floor section. 5 more children were recovered. 14 children. 1 container. 1 shipment. 1 route. The case immediately changed. This was no longer a smuggling investigation. It was a human trafficking investigation. By noon, analysts began tracing the container's movement history. The pattern emerged quickly. Container 22 was not unique. Over the previous 16 months, 17 containers had traveled through the same routing corridor. Each showed small weight discrepancies. Each carried unexplained transit gaps. Each had received expedited release approval. And every shipment carried the same authorization designation, Port DIR4. Investigators expanded the review. The 17 containers had passed through Savannah, Charleston, Jacksonville, and Houston. Some carried agricultural equipment. Others carried industrial supplies, construction materials, commercial machinery. The cargo declarations changed. The approval pattern did not. By 4:17 p.m., analysts linked at least 30 children to the shipment corridor. Some had already been recovered through previous operations. Others remained unaccounted for. The numbers continued to grow. Then investigators identified the individual behind Port DIR-4. The code belonged to David Langford, 58 years old, Director of Port Release Operations, 22 years in cargo management, publicly respected, frequently praised for improving shipping efficiency and reducing inspection delays. His authorization code appeared on every flagged shipment. And as investigators began pulling 7 years of release records connected to his office, they realized they were no longer looking at one suspicious container. They were looking at a system. At 8:06 a.m. the following morning, FBI financial crime analysts and Homeland Security investigators began tracing the authorization history connected to Port DIR-4. What they found changed the direction of the case. David Langford's authorization code did not appear on every expedited shipment moving through Savannah. It appeared only on a specific category of cargo. Containers that avoided secondary inspection. Containers that received priority release. Containers that moved through the port faster than standard processing times. Over a 7-year period, Langford's code appeared on approximately 5,200 international shipments. Most were legitimate, but 417 shipments matched one or more indicators already identified in the trafficking investigation. Routing gaps, weight discrepancies, seal irregularities, inspection bypasses. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Investigators expanded the review. The containers originated from different countries, different exporters, different cargo types. But many ultimately moved through the same network of logistics companies operating across Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Arizona. The names changed. The paperwork changed. The routes changed. The companies behind them did not. At 1:27 p.m., investigators followed the money. Federal analysts discovered that several shipping companies involved in the flagged routes had paid consulting fees to a group of logistics advisory firms. The payments appeared legitimate: compliance services, routing support, cargo documentation assistance. Nothing unusual on the surface. But when investigators traced the money further, the consulting firms connected to shell companies registered in Delaware, Nevada, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. The financial trail eventually looped back toward individuals connected to Langford's inner circle. Over 7 years, investigators estimated that more than $980 million had moved through the network. The trafficking operation was generating enormous revenue. But the money raised another question. Who had built the system? Langford understood cargo operations. He understood port procedures. But the network displayed a deeper level of knowledge. Someone knew exactly how federal inspection protocols worked. Someone knew how to stay beneath detection thresholds. At 3:42 p.m., FBI cyber analysts traced an encrypted communications network linked to several of the shell companies. The system led to a logistics consulting firm operating outside Jacksonville, Florida. The company was called Atlantic Trade Strategies. Publicly, it provided transportation consulting services. Privately, investigators discovered something else. The firm's owner was Victoria Hale, 61 years old, former Deputy Director of Cargo Security Programs at Homeland Security. Before that, 12 years developing cargo screening procedures used at major American ports. For more than 2 decades, Hale had helped build the very inspection systems now being bypassed. Inside recovered communications, her name appeared repeatedly. Her operational designation was simple: the Navigator. One message recovered from the archive read, "The system does not need to be broken. It only needs to be predicted." That sentence stayed with investigators because it explained everything. David Langford signed the approvals. Victoria Hale designed the path that made those approvals invisible. And by sunset, federal prosecutors were preparing warrants that would reach far beyond the port of Savannah. At 5:11 p.m., a federal judge in the Southern District of Georgia signed simultaneous search and arrest warrants for 12 locations across Georgia, Florida, Texas, and Arizona. At 5:37 p.m., the order went out. Execute. Location 1. Port Release Operations Headquarters. Port of Savannah. Federal agents entered through the secured administrative wing while cargo operations continued around them. David Langford was inside his office reviewing end-of-day shipment reports. He was detained without resistance. Inside the office, investigators recovered 2 desktop computers, multiple encrypted storage devices, and a locked cabinet containing shipment summaries marked with handwritten reference codes. Several matched containers already identified in the trafficking investigation. Approximately $126,000 in cash was recovered from a concealed compartment behind a bookshelf. Location 2. David Langford's residence outside Savannah. Agents recovered 4 burner phones, offshore banking records, and a wall safe containing approximately $540,000 in cash and documentation linked to foreign accounts. Location 3. Atlantic Trade Strategies. Jacksonville, Florida. Victoria Hale was present when agents arrived. A file deletion program was running on the company's primary server. Cyber specialists immediately disconnected the system from the network. Most of the data was preserved. Inside the archive, investigators found years of communications, routing plans, inspection forecasts, and payment records tied to the shipment corridor. Location 4. A commercial warehouse outside Houston, Texas. On paper, the facility stored imported agricultural equipment. In reality, investigators found something very different. Behind a false interior wall were modified container panels, counterfeit shipping seals, forged cargo documentation, and construction materials designed specifically to build concealed compartments inside shipping containers. The warehouse also contained records connecting multiple shipments already under investigation. As the operation expanded, investigators uncovered the larger structure behind the trafficking corridor. The containers were only one part of the system. Shipping brokers, documentation processors, warehouse operators, financial coordinators, multiple businesses operating under legitimate licenses, each performing a small role, each appearing lawful, together creating a pipeline that had operated for years without attracting significant attention. At 10:42 p.m., analysts completed their first review of the recovered server data from Atlantic Trade Strategies. The operation had an internal name, the Harbor Route. The Harbor Route archive contained shipment schedules, payment ledgers, routing instructions, shell company ownership records, and communications between members of the network. More importantly, it contained detailed tracking records for containers moving through the trafficking corridor. The investigation had started with 17 suspicious containers. The archive referenced many more. Federal investigators now believe they were looking at only a portion of the operation. And for the first time since the investigation began, they had evidence connecting every layer of the system. The money, the routes, the approvals, the containers, and the people behind them. By midnight, 22 suspects had been identified. The arrests were only hours away. By 2:14 a.m., federal authorities had completed the first phase of the operation. 22 individuals had been arrested or placed under active federal investigation. Among them were shipping coordinators, warehouse managers, documentation specialists, logistics brokers, and financial intermediaries connected to the Harbor Route network. David Langford, Victoria Hale, and several senior operators identified inside the recovered records were now in federal custody. Assets tied to the operation were frozen pending forfeiture proceedings. Commercial properties, warehouse facilities, transportation companies, bank accounts, and shell corporations spread across multiple states. But the detail that stayed with investigators was not the money. It was not the shipping network. It was not the sophistication of the operation. It was the children. As analysts worked through years of recovered records, they began matching shipment references against missing child reports, border intelligence databases, and law enforcement case files. The 14 children recovered from Container 22 were only the beginning. Investigators ultimately connected more than 30 children to the trafficking corridor operating through the shipping network. Some had already been located during follow-up operations. Others remained the subject of active investigations. For federal agents, those children became the true measure of the case. Every forged document, every altered seal, every routing gap, every inspection bypass, every shell company, all of it had existed for one purpose: to move human beings through a system designed to move cargo. The Harbor Route archive revealed something else. The network had survived for years, not because the system failed. It survived because it understood the system better than the people responsible for protecting it. Every shipment traveled through approved routes. Every container carried valid paperwork. Every transfer appeared legitimate. Every approval looked routine. The operation did not exist outside the system. It existed inside it. That was the protection. Not secrecy. Predictability. Federal authorities announced immediate reviews of cargo inspection procedures across multiple major ports, authorization pathways, container release protocols, secondary inspection procedures, routing audits. Every layer of the process would be reviewed, because investigators had identified a troubling reality. The greatest vulnerabilities were not always where the system was weak. Sometimes they existed where the system was trusted. The detail that remained with many investigators after the arrests was surprisingly small. It was not the hidden compartment. It was not the forged documentation. It was not the millions of dollars. It was a 17-hour gap, a period of time that appeared insignificant, a gap most people would never notice. Marcus Ellison noticed it. The official inspection checklist did not require inspectors to investigate unexplained routing delays unless specific risk indicators were triggered. The shipment triggered none. Marcus investigated anyway, and that decision exposed a trafficking corridor that investigators believe had operated for years inside legitimate commercial trade. 3 days after the operation, Marcus returned to work under federal protection. The observation that opened the case was not part of any formal protocol. No automated alert identified the container. No system warning flagged the shipment. The system approved it. A person questioned it. And sometimes that difference changes everything. Because the greatest danger is not always what openly breaks the rules. Sometimes it is what learns how to operate inside them without being noticed. If a trafficking corridor this sophisticated could move children through approved shipping routes, verified documentation, and legitimate cargo infrastructure for years before being exposed, how many other shipments are moving tonight through ports around the world carrying something no inspection report has questioned yet?